So we're going to go ahead and get started. I think we'll have some others join us, but that's okay. Bruce, welcome. So we're going to talk about school board meetings. So what does a school board meeting look like? So, and we'll look at an agenda here in a moment. But first, the first thing you want to do is you want to read all material before the meeting. And you'll have all that access to you electronically, or you can even ask for it in print. Katie is very kind to do that if you need to. Jot notes to things that you do not understand. And those are things that if you need to ask during the meeting, but usually it's a lot better to ask those questions through the board president or superintendent before the meeting so that you're prepared. So if you have a question about something or you don't understand something on the agenda, you can ask them ahead of time to get that information so that you can have your thoughts together during the meeting for anything that you want to discuss. And then, of course, listen, listen, listen. That's how you learn. Being new on the board is just kind of be patient and listen. Everybody wants to get their agenda out there right away, but it's always better just to take a little time and kind of get acclimated to the board meetings and how they're run. And there'll always be time for you to bring your items of interest forward. So when we look at school board meetings, we actually meet twice per month for our regular sessions, and we actually have changed our work sessions for every regular session. So now when we meet twice a month, we also have our work sessions twice a month. And that was something we didn't start, I think, until I became president. But one of the reasons we did that, and I think I talked about that before, is so that we have time as a board to discuss things and just talk things out. Because with the Open Meetings Act, it's really difficult to do. Most of our work sessions are 1 hour and they begin at 4 p.m. Our executive session and break, we kind of do things at the same time. It's 1 hour and it begins at 5 p.m. if needed. Sometimes we don't need an executive session, not very often, but sometimes. Our executive sessions, of course, are contract negotiations, superintendent evaluation, any litigation, student discipline that we need to take care of. And then what happens with the break is out of your um, stipend that you get for being on the school board, Katie or accounting or whoever, somewhere behind the scenes there, somebody takes $50 out a month to pay for our meals. And we also have 150 is school board room. So if you were to come into the school and needed into the district and do some work before the meeting or whatever, you could actually go into 150, and Katie so graciously keeps the little refrigerator stocked and we have snacks there and that sort of thing. So it's really been kind of nice. And then the regular session begins at 6:15. Um, if a holiday, there's no meetings in the month of July. And I say that, although we just had meetings this last July, but that I think was a little different because of everything that was going on. But normally we do not have meetings in July. And if a holiday falls on a Monday, the meeting is usually moved to Tuesday or Thursday. It just kind of depends on what's going on and what the schedule is for the district. And sometimes there'll be a special meeting called, like we've had a couple of meetings to talk about governance, the budget. And this is where we just set up different times for a meeting that's not normally scheduled. We give out notice, but it's a meeting just to talk about those specific things. And sometimes when budget's going on or something else that we just need to address, then we'll schedule those special sessions. And each board member has access electronically to the board docs, in which all agendas, documents, requests for information. And then if you require printed copies, you can request those through Katie. Each board member also has an email, an ASD email, and they also have a phone number. And what happens if there are calls, they're rerouted to a message system. So you'll get an email saying that you have a phone message and you can open that up. End of emails addressed to one board member should be responded to in a timely manner, with a copy to the board president and the school board secretary. Email sent to the entire board is the board president will answer those as a representative of the board. We talked before about, if there's any media, anything like that, they're kind of the voice for the board and to um, talk about what the position of the board is. Now, you as a board member, if you do decide to address an email, you want to make sure that this is your opinion and not the board's
Yes,
opinion.
that's what
Because,
I was getting ready to ask you, Star. Is
yeah.
that, yeah, so let's just say I received the email, right? But
Hmm.
the question is an email that should actually then, even though it's addressed to me, but the board should weigh in on it. How is that handled?
It's up to you. If it's addressed to you, you could certainly answer them, or you could ask them if you'd like to pass it on to the school board president for a response from the board as a whole.
Okay,
Yeah. And it's just very important that you say that, you don't speak for the whole board, that you're an individual board member. And so you are responding to them as an individual board member. And then also in Katie's office, we have like little mailbox slots. So a lot of times we get mail or all kinds of different things that we get in our box. Magazines. I mean, I think we got some smoked salmon in there. But there are boxes that you'll have to check periodically just to make sure you don't have anything in there. And then sometimes as board members, you're asked to MC musical concerts, which is kind of one of my favorite things. During the spring or the winter, and I don't know how to work this next year, but if we have concerts, and it could be the jazz band, it could be um, orchestra. I mean, it could be so many things. It can be elementary, it can be middle school, it could be high school. But a lot of times I'll ask school board members to MC for that, and they'll give you a script. It's really a lot of fun. And then also, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but you'll also be officiating at graduations, depending on what area of schools that you have. And we'll talk about that a little later too. So, one of the things about the school board meetings is public testimony. And of course, public testimony has changed a little bit because of COVID. So we do have a lot more people calling in and giving testimony, but it still remains 3 minutes per person, 1 hour time slot at the beginning of the meeting, and testimony in excess of 1 hour will be heard at the second opportunity for testimony at the end of the meeting, or it can be submitted in writing. So if they just can't wait, they can put it in writing. It does go into our board docs, and all board members do read that. Did you want to add anything to that, Elisa? Alicia?
No, one of the things as you're talking about like email protocol and some of the meeting preparation and stuff like that, just wanted to highlight it as a BB 9271. That's our code of conduct. It's about a 27 page document that really lays out a lot of this stuff that is part of our bylaws that we have committed to as board members. And after the election, there'll be a period where we'll all be able to sit down, have those conversations, talk about our board norms, stuff like that. But a lot of what Star is talking about is already out there as a policy. And the reason we put it out there that way is so there's very clear expectations set for board members and for the administration. And so it's a good document to read. And I would encourage those that have the time to go ahead and read it.
And we'll also both that document will be attached to this PowerPoint. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that further on in the meeting. And that will be it. It is a lengthy document, but it is good reading. It won't put you to sleep, I don't think. But that will be attached to this PowerPoint, and it'll be out there on the website just as the first meeting was. Did anyone have problems getting the information from the first meeting? Okay. So one of the things on public statements, we just want to, and this is BB 9010, public statements, and it's before voting on any issue, all school board members shall be encouraged to present whatever evidence that they feel important to the matter. I gotta make this second read at hand. So we want to make sure that the school board shall fully consider the implications and relevancy of all information presented. So during the school board meeting, it's important for school board members to present their opinions, be able to openly discuss, for each board member to understand all aspects of the issue before the school board, before making a decision. I know there's sometimes, maybe I thought this is the way I'm going to vote. And then as we get in the meetings and we hear different opinions from different school board members or more information from the district, sometimes that might change the way I vote based on the information that's presented. So it's very important as school board members to be able to present our opinions and the reasons that we are voting the way we are, and to present that to the other school board members. Then any school member who may wish to criticize, oppose any specific school board action should do so during the school board meeting. Once a school board decision has been reached, all school board members, and I say all school board members, shall abide by that decision until it's amended or rescinded by subsequent school board action. So when a school board members express their opinions outside of the school board meeting, it is their responsibility to respect the democratic nature of the school board and our decision making, and always identify personal viewpoints as such. So if you're making public statements in the name of the school board, shall be issued by the school board president, as we talked about before, if appropriate, by the superintendent or a designee at the direction of the school board president. So you may have voted something different. Let's say it was 6-1 and you're very adamant about this and you voted against it. But it is our job as a school board to support the decision making of the school board, because we are one of 7 and it is a democratic vote. And if you are going to speak on maybe why you didn't vote that way, you definitely have to make sure that you're doing that as a personal viewpoint. Any questions? Okay. So now we're not going to get a lot into Robert's rules. I would say if you're not familiar with them, it would be a good time to maybe get you a little handbook or something. Katie has some. If you get elected, you can certainly get something from Katie. We have some cheat sheets that the board uses, but we do operate using Robert's rules. So Robert's rules are followed for all of our regular board sessions, and then our committee meetings, we use like a modified Robert's rules. Just become familiar with both. In our committee meetings, it's just a lot more relaxed, but we still try to follow, like we said, a modified version. So I did put like some big mistakes. So speaking twice in a row. Members are reminded that no one may speak a second time until everyone who wishes to do so has spoken once. Now, I know in some cases, board president, if they have like a follow-up, they might let them go ahead and do that follow-up question because it's in conjunction with the first question. But in most cases, the president will always make sure that everyone's had a chance to speak at least once before he or she allows someone to speak again. And then, as a board member, you could always say point of order. And the member has spoken twice while others are waiting to speak. So just to point out. And then the chair can just say, the chair does not have the right to dominate the discussion, but must speak in turn. So another one is not seeking recognition. It's important that we have, it's a little more difficult now because we have some viewing the board meetings from Zoom and some from in person. So the raise hand feature has really been a challenge for the board president. But until you are, and a lot of times he or she'll say, okay, start, you're going to be next, and then it'll be Andy, and then maybe Dave, but she'll kind of give us, the order of how she's going to call on us. But yeah, it's very important that you don't just blurt out. You have to be identified by the president before you can speak. And then speaking directly to another member, all remarks have to go through the chair. So if you're speaking, you just say Madam President, and whatever you want to say, but you can't speak directly to another member. And then interrupting another person. So if someone's talking, you don't want to interrupt them. Members will kindly refrain from interrupting each other. Um, Now, there may be, maybe you've said something, and we'll talk about some other examples of inappropriate remarks that you might want to say point of order, but that's how you interrupt, by saying point of order and having the board president recognize you. So when we talk about inappropriate remarks, like personal remarks, members will refrain from making personal remarks. And personal remarks are just not allowed. We're not going to attack anybody on the board personally, or anybody in the audience, or anything else. Insulting language, vulgarity attacks. Can't say that I've ever seen this in my 5 years, but of course we're not going to allow that either. Inflammatory language. That's another thing. Just trying to get people going, and kind of instigating. That's something that's not going to be allowed either. Criticizing past actions. So members may not criticize a past action of the group during a meeting, with two exceptions. Members may not criticize a past action of the group meeting, with two exceptions. So anyway, that would be the chair again who would recognize that, or the president that would recognize that, and would either allow it or not allow it. And remarks that are not germane or relevant. So let's say the board is talking about a certain action item, and another board member brings up something else that is totally not what we're talking about. There may be a point of order just to say that board member is not, in my view, the topic is not germane to our discussion. So just another comment you can make. So it's challenging Robert's rules. I know, as when I was board president, I know when Alexa is board president, a lot of times we get challenged with different things. Katie is kind of our expert, and she helps us out when things like that pop up. If we need to look up any, how would we handle this, because things do happen that we don't always or have encountered beforehand. So the other thing, when we talk about public testimony, one of the things that we don't do, and this would be in your code of conduct, is if somebody has testified, we listen. We don't ask questions. We don't interact with the person that's testifying. And when they're done testifying, it's not our job um, to answer. Like, some people will say, I have this question or whatever, and that's not what they're there for. They're just there to testify, give us their opinion, or their viewpoint on certain policies or something we're voting on. And so as a board member, we do not comment on their testimony. And one of the reasons we don't is because we don't think about it, but it's very intimidating for some individuals to testify in front of the board. I mean, if you're looking at us, we're up at that dais. It can be pretty intimidating. So the last thing you want to do is discourage anyone from being able to testify in person, on the phone, or even in writing. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that as board members. And the other thing I would say, and I've noticed this sometimes, is sometimes board members will be talking to each other in the board meeting, like even when testimony is going on or something. You don't want to do that either, because that shows disrespect. And really, we shouldn't be talking to each other during the meetings. If it's really something that important, you should ask for a break, or address a school board president and see if you can take a recess, or if it's that important. But if it has anything to do with the school board meeting, it really should be spoken out loud for everyone to hear. Okay. And we went over this. So the other thing we have is board ethics. And so some of the most common ethical questions, one is state law and it's conflicts of interest. And this prohibits board members from being employed by the board, provides that the immediate family of a board member may not be employed by the board, except upon the written approval of the Commissioner of Education. It also provides that each municipality shall adopt a conflict of interest ordinance, which we do have, that contains specific requirements pertaining to elected officials. So a member is to declare any substantial financial interest in an official action and ask to be excused from a vote on the matter. The presiding officer shall rule on the request, and then it's the decision of the presiding officer may be overridden by a majority vote. So if a member declares that they have a conflict of interest, the presiding officer or the president shall rule on the request. If board members are not in line with that, then they could vote and it could be overridden by a majority vote. So trying to think example of a conflict of interest. Can you think of anything, Elisa?
From a board,
I know, I was trying to think
maybe
of something.
if maybe somebody's spouse worked for one of the construction companies that was
There we
about to
go.
get a bid or something like that,
Yeah.
would be an example.
Yeah, that's a good one. Thank you. I every once in a while I'll call on you. I hope you don't mind.
Happy to help.
Thank you. So the next one is gifts. What is a gift? Well, it's money. It can be an item of value. It can be a service. It can be a loan. It can be a travel or hospitality accommodation, entertainment, or employment. And it's provided to an elected official or to another person or entity designated by the elected official for less than full value. And there's the ordinance there that you can look at. But certain unsolicited gifts are permitted if any required disclosure form is timely filed. And you can find that form also in the municipality code. And so what are some examples? Payment for a business meal, discount price available to the public sector that they offer to everyone. Nominal gift from a student, parent, or community organizer. As teachers and board members, sometimes I've gotten cards from students or, classes that have made me cards. I mean, that's probably a nominal value, but it's still a gift. And then, so when you're thinking about best practices, consider the conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict when receiving or giving a gift. So avoid activities that create an inference that the gift is intended to influence independent judgment. So some examples might be buying lunch, donating travel, a ride to the airport from a neighbor who is a parent of an ASD student. So those are just some examples of something that could look possibly like somebody's doing you a favor, especially if it's a parent of a neighbor. So just avoid activities that might create that inference. Gifts over $50 are rarely approved. So I think the standard is just always think of gifts, anything under $50 and anything over $50 is probably not going to be approved. And then I thought we'd talk a little bit. I know here you are looking to just get on the board, but I thought we'd talk a little bit about removal of a board member from office. There's been some conversation on this recently, and on that page here. So, some of the reasons a board member can be removed from office is unexcused absences, removal for cause under the procedures and standards of the municipality code, contract avoidable, and sanctions. And when I talk about sanctions, it talks about if a complaint is made, that there's a conflict of interest and it's been violated by a board member. And if the board decides that the allegations are serious enough to warrant an investigation, the board shall appoint a committee to investigate. And I will say in my 5 years, we've, knock on wood, and luckily, we've never had to do anything like this. But the committee is composed of one board member, one member of the administration, and three members of the public. And the committee has the authority to conduct a formal hearing. And um, if the committee determines that a board member has violated this section, the board member may take such action as it is empowered to do by law, including but not limited to public censure. So that's just one when we talk about not necessarily unexcused absences, but for contract voidable or for removal for cause under the procedures and standards of the municipality code. Um, some of the other reasons board members can be removed, and it could have to do with a breach of public trust, and that's outlined in Municipality Code 29.10.060. The accusation triggers a detailed review and hearing process, as we talked about before. Um, Following that process, removal can occur with a 2/3 vote of the school board. And actions constituting breach of the public trust are delineated and include a catch-all category of breach of statutory or charter imposed duty. So basically, it's just there's a list here that gives greater guidance on those specific actions. So it could be anything. I mean, that sounded kind of mumbo jumbo there, but what it's talking about is accepting any cash gifts from doing business with the district, violating the municipality code of ethics, perjury, presumably related to official duties, falsifying records or reports, nepotism, personal use or destruction of district property, official oppression, absenteeism or lack of attendance at board meetings, and focuses on willful violations in connection with official duties. So it also has to take a look at, the circumstances, why it happened, and that it is a willful violation when we're looking at those. So each board member, and I don't know, Katie, if you can go to the board norms. So when we are elected as board members, we have, it's called the Anchorage School District Board Norms. And this is something when you are elected and sworn in, the first meeting, this will be presented to you and all board members will sign this. And so it says, we will represent the needs, interests, and achievement of all students in the district and place those above all else in the decisions we make. We will maintain trust and mutual respect among school board members, school district employees, and the community at large by treating everyone with dignity and respect, even in time of disagreement. And there will be some of those. We will establish meeting times and agendas in accordance with the Alaska Open Meetings Act. We will be on time for all meetings. Um, and that's something I can't stress enough. I mean, if you're, and things happen, I understand that, but certainly try to be on time for all meetings as everyone's time's valuable. And we want to look professional in our role and let people know that we value their time and their attendance. We will make informed decisions using sufficient data. Guidance by the board to the administration will be put into writing. We will be prepared in advance and will actively participate in discussions while being respectful of other members. We will listen effectively to others and follow protocols of the chair, president before speaking. We will maintain confidential information from executive sessions in accordance with the Alaska Open Meetings Act. And again, that's in our executive sessions. Anytime we hold those, that is confidential information. It is not to be shared outside of that room. And speaking of that, when we talk about Zoom meetings, because right now some board members are still participating by Zoom, you have to be conscious of where you're participating in the Zoom meeting, especially if you're in executive session, because really no one else should be in the room. We will take no individual action that could compromise the integrity of the board, superintendent, or the Anchorage School District. We will follow a board code of conduct and hold each other accountable. We will advocate for public schools and public education. We readily accept our roles as ambassadors of the Anchorage School District and promote support for all of our schools. Now, that is our Anchorage School District board norms, which on your first board meeting, you will be asked to sign. So hopefully that won't be anything that you wouldn't be agreeing to. And then the next one we have is our Anchorage School Board of Conduct. Like Alicia said, it is kind of a long document. I'm not going to read it. I might go through a couple of things here. It will be attached. It's a BP 9271. It will be attached to this PowerPoint so that you'll definitely have time to take a look at this and look over it. And it just says this code of conduct applies to relationships and interactions among and between board members, as well as between board members and the students, parents, community, stakeholders, groups, superintendent, and staff. And it's to promote ethical, businesslike, and lawful conduct, including appropriate use of authority and decorum while serving as an elected school board member. You know, it just talks about acting in the best interest of the Anchorage community when representing them honestly and equally. It talks about no conflict of interest, sense of purpose to establish appropriate board policies, conduct the school board business. I think basically, you know, I could read over all of this, but it would be better for you guys to read it yourself. And then if you have questions, you can certainly contact myself or the board president or anyone else that you'd like to contact. You know, it talks about communications between the board and superintendent. We'll communicate with all board members regularly via the superintendent update with information that will include but not limited to. So what we get as a school board, it's called School Board Connect. And that's where if we've asked questions, possibly we might find our answers in that School Board Connect, where the superintendent posts information for school board members of something that's going on new in the district or something that's just come up or just kind of relating information that school board members have been interested in, those type of things. But we do get a weekly board connect that kind of gives us an update on what's going on in the district, which has been very helpful. Alicia, you have anything to add?
Did you say Elisa or Alicia?
Alicia, sorry. You know how good
No.
I am at that. Hildy.
No. You're doing great, Star. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. All right. So that is a long document worth reading. You know, the other thing I would tell you too is we showed you last time where to go for the bylaws of the school board. It's Article 9 and it's all the BP 900s. Try to go up there and take a look at that and read them. If you get elected, that's probably the most important bylaws that you can take a look at to begin with before you start looking at the others to know what your responsibilities are, what board committees there are, representation, all those type of things. So I can't stress that enough. And if we could go back to the slides, please, Katie.
I will stop sharing, and then if you reshare, you'll get your
Oh,
slides
okay.
back.
Thank you. Okay, so we got that. So the next thing we're going to talk about is budget. And I am so just overwhelmed and appreciative that Andy Ratliff, who is our Senior Director of Office of Management and Budget, is here to talk about the budget with us, how we put it together, what it looks like this year. And wow, he can do a whole lot better job than I can because he lives and breathes this. I just have to look at it once a year, but this guy knows it in and out. So Andy, thank you, thank you, thank you. I so appreciate you being here. And I'm going to turn this over to you. I'll stop sharing.
Great, thank you. So again, my name is Andy Ratliff. I'm the Director of the Office of Management and Budget for the school district. And I want to take this time to kind of walk through our budget document and kind of show you how everything's laid out and where to find information. And, you know, our office is always happy to meet with you as either in your capacity as board members or private citizens. You know, we're always happy to walk, answer any questions you have, make sure everyone understands the information we're presenting. So with that, I'm going to share. Okay, can you see that?
Yep.
We'll walk through the way our budget is prepared and what goes into it. This document's almost 500 pages, so it is, if you just pick it up and try to read it, it kind of helps to have a context of how it's made and what information is included. The first thing I'd probably call your attention to is the table of contents. And the biggest thing, if you're looking for—
Andy, hi, this is Marilyn Stewart. Real quick before you get started, will
Yes,
this
ma'am.
be available for us to pick up? How do we get a copy of this?
That's a great question. I don't have a whole lot of hard copies, but it is on our website. If you go under departments and click on Office of Management and Budget, you can find the FY22 budget information on there.
Okay,
But
thank you.
if you do want a hard copy, we can print some. I think it might have a few extras.
If you could put my name on one, I would appreciate it. I can pick it up tomorrow.
Certainly, and I will see. Do you just want me to— I can bring it up to Katie's area and she can save it for you.
Sure.
Awesome, thank you.
I'd be happy to do that. And Andy, is there a way to enlarge the image there? It's a little bit tough to. Thank you.
Okay. And I've got negotiations in the morning and I got to take a kid to school, so I'm not going to be there until the afternoon. So if you want to pick it up in the afternoon sometime, that would be perfect.
Thank you.
Yep. So when you're kind of looking at, if you're looking at first, and we'll get to like how these pages look, but if you're looking for specific organizations as you're going through the budget, these organizational detail pages are laid out by, first it's all the district-wide departments. So you can see the school board, superintendent, management and budget. So 1,000 are organization codes, 1,000 through 1,099 are all departmental budgets. So anything that's kind of a centralized service. 1,100 through 1,499 are elementary schools. For the most part, they are in alphabetical order, but sometimes they're not quite line up right. Like here you go, Trailside, Susitna, and Taku. And it's just the way that those, it's more of when these schools came online than anything. They tried to get them alphabetically, but sometimes it just didn't quite work. 1,500s are charter schools. 1,600s are special education, special services department, gifted, ELL, Native education are in there. 1,700s are middle schools and 1,800s are secondary or high schools and alternative secondary schools. And then we have the other funds, the transportation and student nutrition, capital planning and grants. So that's really, you know, this is kind of your basis to find the information quickly as if you're looking for individual organizations. But going through it, we have org charts, the school board, how the supervision is laid out within the superintendent's purview. The district profiles give some information about the district, some of the long-term planning and everything that goes into it. This is our budget calendar, just kind of a rough overview of what we're doing at any given time. So our first step in preparing our budget is preparing something we call a pro forma budget, which is essentially how much is it going to cost to have school look the same way as it is this year. This year is probably not a great example, but in normal times, we take, here's how we're doing business, here's how many teachers we have, or what our staffing is per student, and then figure out how much that is going to cost next year after inflation and other contractual adjustments are made. And that really gives us a budget gap. So then we estimate our revenue at the same time. So we say, here's how much we're going to get in revenue based on state statute. Here's how much it's going to cost to do business the same way as we're doing business now. And that creates a budget gap. So when you hear the district talking about a budget gap, it's really comes from this document. And this document's out on our website as well. And it just kind of lays out what these increasing cost factors are and why we have a gap every year. So it's really informational, and there's a lot of things in that that'll help you understand why that gap comes from. So the whole time we're doing that, we're still trying to estimate costs for next year that are going to go into into this document. And that's really in the months of November, December, and January. We are getting the budget ready, trying to estimate all these costs and determine what revenues we're going to get. At the same time, we're talking to community members and getting testimony. And then we release the budget to the public towards the end of January, early February. The board gets the budget in the 2 meetings in February to vote on it and approve it. And then it goes to the assembly for approval in March. Kind of the underlying issue that we do have every year, and I'm not sure if, frankly, we'll ever get it addressed, but we have our budget prepared by the end of January every year. The state has just begun to meet with their legislator. Well, the legislative session has just started. So, if the legislature changes statute, increases the base student allocation, or provides other funding or cuts funding, then we have to go back afterwards and do a revised budget. So that's really just an overview of what our calendar looks like when we're going through, as my office is trying to prepare the budget. So we have like a little bit of detail on some long-term financial planning. It's just really high-level overviews are our enrollment in our facilities. So also in the budget, we provide this document, which I've got. We print quite a few of these. These are 16-page documents that we can give out to folks that give a high-level overview, kind of another high-level overview of where we get our money and kind of what changes we're making throughout in this budget cycle. There's some details about how many students we have, just other programmatic things that we have within the school, just some statistics that the school district has. The board goals and guardrails, which I think Ms. Morsette's going to talk about a little later, are all listed in here. And then we provide, this is the state foundation for me. This is probably, let me blow this up. This is how we're essentially how we're funded by the state and local governments. So it takes the school size. We take, so 40, in this model, 42,000 would be our ADM that we're projecting for next year. And that's just the neighborhood schools. So correspondence schools come in later. So this is all just brick and mortar. There's a school size factor that gets adjusted. So the bigger your school is, the less money you get per student. So smaller schools, you get more money per student. And then as you go out towards the end of it, you get less money essentially. So there's a district cost factor it's supposed to adjust for cost of living differences among communities between districts. So Anchorage is a 1. You don't have any adjustment for living in Anchorage because the state at one time, probably 18 years ago now, has said Anchorage is the cheapest place to live, and they've kept those cost size factors the same, as Anchorage does not have a cost factor. Everyone else is more expensive than what it says. Then we increased 20%, kind of a block grant style, for special education, ELL, gifted, and vocational education. Similar to this career and technical education, so 1.5% block style grant to provide CTE courses. And then the intensive needs count to fund the students with higher needs that need like individual busing. And I think there's a variety of services the student needs to receive to be able to qualify for intensive needs funding. So each one of those students is multiplied by 13 to add to the ADM count, and then they add the correspondence at the end, which is 90% of the correspondence enrollment. So you go from an ADM or enrollment of 43,000 to adjusted ADM of 75,000. That's multiplied by basic need, or the base student allocation, to get what the state calls basic need, which is for Anchorage for next year, we're projecting 445 million. And from that basic need, the state says the city is required to pay about 112 million off, and it's based on the property values within the city times 2.65 mils. So they reduce their funding by the amount the city has to pay, and then they reduce an amount for federal impact aid. And federal impact aid is money that the district gets for having students on base. So all these, for the most part, or on non-taxable lands. Or so if your students live on base, we have 1,500 or so students living on J-Bear, we get money for those students, and it's really to offset the local property tax you can't collect from on-base housing. So the total foundation revenue, we're projecting about 326 million, and then the quality schools grant is $16 per student or per adjusted ADM for 1.2 million. Total state revenue about 327 million. The required local contribution, this is how much the city has to pay, and then the city can also tax up to 23% of basic need. So we've always requested the maximum amount, in the cities, for at least since I've been here, always been willing to provide the maximum allowable contribution that they can. And the 23% comes from there's laws around this reduction for federal impact aid, where you have to be comparable to all the other districts in the state. And that comparability is within kind of a 25% plus or minus range, where everyone's funded somewhat equally. So if they stay within that 25% up or down range, then that's what the federal government allows them to take this 7 million out of the formula, because they've comparably funded state services or districts across the state. I think Kansas is the only other state in the nation that does that. So the rest of this document is, kind of where do we get our money? This is just kind of a rough outline of the percentages of what we get our money in. 58% comes from the state, 37% from local, and then the rest comes from federal and other sources. And the other sources would be like facilities rentals, and I think fund balance is the other big one. And then we have some statistics on how it's broken out by state function. So these bars represent comparable how much we spend on instruction, special ed instruction, operations and maintenance. And the two bars here, these orange ones are costs that aren't necessarily within school buildings. That's mostly just the centrally administered sites, or by state function. And in the back of the book, in Appendix A, there is a definition of what all these state function means and what all things go into these categories. It's not necessarily common knowledge of, you see support services students, you probably don't know what's in there. But if you look in the back, it's predominantly nurses, counselors, and security staff. So there are definitions for this you can tie back to in the back that's really helpful to understand what goes in all these different categories. This just says, we're spending about 86% of our money on salaries and benefits. The reason that's really important is when we do have to make budget reductions, most of these other costs are either minimal or fixed costs, and you don't have a lot of leverage to pull. You have to reduce staffing if you don't have the budgets to support inflationary increases.
I have a question for you, Andy.
Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about 86% of the budget going for salaries and benefits, so does that mean as you guys add new teachers on as well, or is it a projection of new hires? How does that work?
So this is, I guess, for when we're projecting out FY22 costs, we take FY21, we take our average teacher salaries, and we have them in kind of broad categories: elementary, secondary, special education teachers. And then we apply whatever contractual obligations we have to those salaries. And we know some folks are going to leave and some new folks are going to come in. And we do have like an attrition account that that will reference that. So as positions stay vacated for an extended period of time, or someone comes in making less money than the previous person, that's where we have this kind of this attrition estimate that we make up to try to capture those savings and put that money back in other areas of the budget.
Okay, thank you.
So just another kind of high level revenue slide. Just shows the amounts we're getting. Same with expenditures, just kind of presented in a little bit different way so you can somewhat different visual on it.
Andy, I have a question if you have a second. This
Yes,
is Sammy Graham. Sorry to interrupt. So my question is, you had the general fund budget, which was what, about 574 or something? But the actual budget is $841,318,521. So I guess my question is, where do you explain where the rest of that funding comes from? Thanks.
That's a good question, and that is in a few pages. So we do get to that, and we do have a write-up to where all that funding comes from and how it's used. And we'll certainly go over that in a minute, but this document's really focused on our general fund. That's generally where most of our changes are made. But so this kind of the liftable executive summary that we can pull out of the book is really geared towards the general fund. But there are, we do want to explain where that $841 million comes from, as that's a very large number. We do need to account for all that. But here, there's this one just kind of an interesting, shows the revenue per student over time that we expect to get. Some budget assumptions. We talk about, this is our PTR slide. For FY22, we did increase PTR by 4 in the general fund, and then we got that PTR down by using this ESSER 2 money, which is the second round of stimulus provided by the federal government. And then there's some all the changes here are just the metrics-based changes that we applies to schools. Like this is the big one, the 235 folks. This is moved to the grant. We are expecting fewer students than what we budgeted for in FY22. We're expecting more than we had in FY21, but fewer than what we budgeted, I guess. So that's why you see a reduction in teachers due to enrollment. So that's purely the metric based on the grade level groupings you see here.
So Andy, I just wanted to point out before you move on that, we talk about things being funded through that one-time funding that we're getting from ESSER 2 grant. Yeah, that's paying for 235 teachers. It's also paying for 17 counselors and library assistants and noon duties. And so you're going to have that one-time money, but there's going to be a point where we don't have that money. And then you have to say, where are they going to get the money to pay for those teachers and those librarians? And it's going to be a real challenge for us as a school board. Sammy, you still have your hand up. Do you have another question? Nope. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out because, right now it looks like if you were to get elected to the school board, it looks like we have plenty of money and we're going to be able to do all the things we want to do. But remember that money is one-time money, and when it's gone, it's gone. And that doesn't help us to keep teachers or programs or anything else. So that's the reason we always have to advocate for adequate funding for our school district. So sorry, Andy, I just wanted to throw that in there.
Oh, no worries. That brings up a great point about when folks are talking about the fiscal cliff, that's exactly what that is.
Mhm.
It's us spending this money on one-time things. And once this money goes away, you're gonna have to make some changes to staffing, or you're gonna have to make some changes somewhere. We've kicked this can down the road for a while now, and it's, with this Easter money, we're putting this more teachers in there, the IT stuff in there, that if we want to keep that going, we're going to need either additional federal money or additional state money. We're essentially beggars of funds. We don't have any taxing authority, so we have to get all our money from the state and local governments. But going along, there's some specific information to elementary schools. We really didn't make any changes other than the enrollment changes, and then we added back some planning time for FTE to kind of adjust some planning needs that we have surrounding self-contained classrooms. And we also added back the health teachers within that too. So for FY21, they were paid out of the CARES Act grant. We had originally reduced them in the FY21 budget. We brought them back under CARES Act, given the circumstances, thought we'd probably need health teachers. And now we're going to continue having them, or at least that part of the metric, whether they're teaching health or not. And I guess I don't really know if they do that. It's gonna, if that model changes with the pandemic. I know this year it has, but I'm not sure what it'll look like next year. But we did maintain those folks in the budget. Middle schools, we go through and list out the metrics based. You can see the metric that we use to provide this, and some of them won't. Some of these metrics don't always line out with the number, like principals. They're not always 400 to 1. Sometimes you'll see them where they have an extra principal, and it's based on programmatic need at the school. So while we use the metric as a guideline, occasionally the secondary administration will advocate for an additional principal here just because of the programmatic need at the school. So you can see the changes we made, the same with high schools and alternative schools. So those we list out individually, and you can see each change in the ones. The alternative schools were really, those programs change some every year. Like this year, we did a lot of consolidation between King Tech and Alaska Middle College. So you see like the office admin, we combined and we were able to reduce one of those. And some of them are just trying to get the budget allocations correct. Like you see a -5 in the principals and +5. Since they have the two principals taking care of both programs there, we split them out, or we share the cost equally between the two schools for budgetary purposes. Then we give some high-level overview of the special service changes and then district-wide changes for the next year. So that's really the short 16-page summary of the budget. And then we'll kind of get into the more detailed pages and address some of the questions about, what else is there besides just the general fund. So we blow this up. This is the governmental funds overview. So the governmental funds that we have are the general fund, transportation, grant, debts, capital project, new student nutrition, and student activities. You'll see this line that's called project carryover. And what this is every year we end the year with some money or money that's unspent, but we have ongoing projects. And a lot of this money is tied to charter schools and the money that they're allowed to carry over. But we add it back into the budget to be spent or get the authority to spend it for the next year as a measure of efficiency. So we're not having to keep these funding years separate. So we can just have one funding year. And it's been a lot easier on IT and our accounting and our school staff to be able to manage by having just one budget version. So this isn't actual money in, it's going to be carried over from the amount projected to be carried over from FY 21 to 22. But this is the overview of all the funds. We do separate out the State of Alaska PERS and TERS on behalf retirement contributions. We don't actually get this money, but we do book a revenue and expenditure based on a percentage of payroll. And the issue that we were having, I think when they first started doing this back in 2008, we did budget for it, but then the state would appropriate some years, tens of millions of dollars more than what they told us based on a percentage of salary would be. So then we'd have to go back to the city to get our upper limit revised for really something that we had no control over. So we did pull that out of the budgetary basis, so we don't, it doesn't go against our upper limit spending. We always report on it, but we do pull it out for the purposes of that, just because the volatility of the funding source. The first part of it's the general fund, and this is where, even with the pamphlet, we spend most of our time on the general fund. It goes through the foundation formula. So you can see the foundation formula, and it's written out, and this is the school size table. Like if you graph out the school size adjustment, if you were to graph this out, it looks like this. So you can see as the schools get bigger, the less money you get per student. But there's a write-up of all the steps and what goes into them, and then how that foundation formula works. So if you want a good understanding of how the foundation formula works, this is a pretty good write-up, and you can really go through it and see how the district is funded. But it goes through all the steps and has some narrative in there. And that's, for the most part, this financial section does talk about is based on revenue generation. It doesn't really go into a whole lot of detail in the expenditures. It's just how the money is generated to the district and in what funds it's generated. So we have write-ups and all that. We have a chart. Here's all the money for the general fund. And the way it's laid out, we have 3 years of actuals as we have them, and then the 21 adopted budget and the 22 proposed. So that's the way just about all these schedules are laid out as you're looking at them. Expenditures, it's just another kind of high level overview of the expenditures on this page. We do a history on the personnel, and we have some appendices in the back too that are really detailed on the personnel history, if you want to look at those. But over the last 5 years, we've cut 334 positions, a lot of those coming in this year, which we cut about 225 FTE. But for the most part, most of those have been added back to the new grant. So this slide is it shows our cost by state function, and then the percentage that's spent on instruction and support. And the percentage of instruction and support is based on prior state statute that said functions 100 through 400 were instruction, 450 through 780 were support. And they used to have us calculate that out, and they call it the 70-30 rule, where they required you to spend at least 70% of your money on instructional activities, which our district never had a problem with it, but there were several districts, especially rural ones, that had really high utility costs that never could meet the 70-30 rule just because of the amount they had to put into utilities. And then the overhead too, if you have a district with only a couple hundred kids and you have to pay a superintendent, school board, business folks in there, the overhead percentage ends up being quite a bit higher in some of those really small districts. So like utilities are all contained in this operations and maintenance and plant. So that's why the 70-30 rule essentially went away, is because they ended up the state had to do so many waivers for so many districts that it just, and they always approved, then no one ever had any problem getting them approved. So they ended up just getting rid of the statute. Pupil transportation, the same thing. We have like a write-up of how we generate the money for the transportation. As you can see, we have about 1.8 million in general fund contributions coming in this year to support the program. We're asking the municipality for about 2.7 million, and then about 500,000 is fund balance. And then the state provides about 21 million. For what it's worth, you know, the state hasn't adjusted the amount that they fund the districts for pupil transportation since 2015. Prior to that, it was an inflation protected thing where that amount would go up each year. But it's remained at $481 per ADM throughout since 2016. You know, and that's caused some challenges for us. As minimum wage increases, there's a state law that says we require to pay our bus drivers 2 times the minimum wage. So back in 2017, I believe, is when the voters passed the minimum wage law that escalated up to where it is now is a little over $10 per hour. And we pay our drivers at the minimum twice that. While that did add quite a bit of cost increases to this fund and to our bottom line, we still have problems hiring bus drivers every year. We lose our drivers to the municipality who pays more and have 12-month work. And then we have problems with not necessarily this summer, but most years we have the tourism industry takes the drivers. And then as the tourist season goes out longer each year into September, drivers are, you know, they get incentivized to stay on with the tour companies rather than come back to work for us. So we do have, even with those higher wages, it's really hard for us to fill those positions and keep folks in there. I think we're one of the only entities that actually provide the training for these folks to get their CDLs. So we get them trained up, they drive for us for a little while, and then a lot of times they just go get a different job. Just one of the funding shortfalls we have in transportation and some of the issues that we are currently experiencing with that fund. And there'll be in the rest of the book, there is some more detail on the expenditures for all these funds. So grants, you know, we expect to get about this 96 million in federal grants. That includes about 50 million for the ESER 2 money. So this grant, it's just kind of a rough breakout of what types of grants, but by and large, it's federal is where we get most of the money from. Debt service, this is how we repay our bond debt and some buses that we have long-term leases on. So you can see that we're projecting about $71 million for our debt budget based on what our bond repayment schedule is. And I think we add a contingency for a new sale. So we're asking for, you know, $38 million in local taxes, 32 million, expecting 32 million in state debt reimbursement, although the governor's budget did propose a 50% reduction of that. And then you can see how it's spent on principal and interest for the most part. Student nutrition, another one of our bigger funds. This is generated primarily by federal sources for just meal reimbursements, free and reduced CEP program, which is the community eligibility provision program where the entire school eats for free. So they can certify it an entire school rather than individuals within that. So we expect to get about $20 million in federal money and about $3 million in local revenue to support this fund. And then student activity money, this is the student raised fund. So they can't spend more than they raise, but we do include it within our upper limit request. But it's predominantly booster clubs, PTAs to put money into these things. So that's really, we don't really have a whole lot of change. You know, you can see this year went down. That's because a lot of the stuff they do is in the fourth quarter of the year and they weren't in school. So that kind of got put on hold. So then it goes into the general fund, and the actual budget books have like tabs so you can tell what pages you're on or what different sections you are. But this is the general fund. section. So the way it's organized, this is by the organization codes that were in the table of contents. So we show it by organization code, so you can see the actual expenditures for 3 years, the adopted budget for the current year, and the proposed budget for next year, and then the change, both in dollars and percent. So you can see, you can go find your favorite department, I guess, and see how much it costs. And then we have more detailed pages for each one of these organizations as we go further along in the book. So that's for all the departments and schools for the general fund, as well as after the general fund, we do have the transportation, food service, grants, and capital projects lined out in a similar fashion. So that we have it in that view, then we have it by, and then we have it by object code. So this is a type of object codes that we have are types of expenditures. So you can look in different types of expenditures and see, how much we spend on librarians in the general fund in a given year, and how much we've had budgeted this year and how much we think it'll cost next year. So as you're looking at these, our object codes are organized by all the 1000s are salary expenditures. The 2000s are benefits associated with those salaries. The 3000s are contracted services and utilities. And the 4000s are supplies, the 5000s are equipment, and 6000s are just kind of other costs. So as you're looking through there, all these numbers have some meaning behind them with respect to what their code is, but for the most part, it is organized in a way that makes sense to us anyway, as far as having those codes mean certain things. But you can tell, how much we spend in a given year on each one of these different types of items. Then we have some information. This is how all the pages will be laid out for the rest of this, for all the budget pages for the individual departments. We have it organized by state object code, which isn't, they're linked to the other object codes, but they're a little bit higher of a summary level. So instead of having, 10 different codes for certificated salaries, it's condensed into one. And this is the standard the state uses. So you can see, it all ties out to that. Then we have, for each organization, we have that page, and then we have this page that shows the staffing. So you can see the changes in staffing to get to the 225 reduction. This is just the general fund in total. Other information, this is by state function and state objects. So you can see instruction and then the state objects. And this is to be compliant with the way that the state wants us to report it back to them. So we have that for all the state objects. And then here's where we see you can see each individual organization code. And if you look at the table of contents, you can find which page number that's on. So I don't want to go up, but like I said, it has the cost and then the FTE for each entity. Is there any questions on this before I move along?
Any questions from anyone? I know it's a lot. It's always a lot for us as board members too to comprehend. Alicia, Hildy. Did I lose you? There you are.
I just turned my phone. Yeah, I just want to put a plug out for asking any question you want. Andy will not judge you. Nobody will judge you. The budget is big. And sometimes it can be a question you asked last week, and now it kind of makes a little bit more sense. And you can ask the same question again. There's never a wrong time or a wrong budget question to ask. So, and if you don't think of one tonight, you can just email a list, and say, here's some questions I had, and you'll never get to that next step unless you ask those first questions you have. So don't hesitate or be shy.
And one of the things I want to say also is that Andy and their department have been really good about meeting with board members individually or in groups of two to actually go over the budget when we first put it out there, just to make sure that we have a good understanding or we can ask any questions that we need to. And you know how people say there is no stupid question. Well, when it comes to budget, sometimes I ask the same question 3 times before I get it. So yeah, that's one of the big jobs we do as a school board. So you want to make sure you get it right.
Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing I would say when you're looking at these graphs are kind of, they're automatically scaled. So as we put in these numbers here, it automatically scales this. So they might look a little more dramatic than what they are on some slides. So it's just keep that in mind. If you're flipping through kind of a high level, you can see it rescales it, and you can see like more dramatic dips and things. So it's just keep that in mind. Is always look at the side to see what the scale is. So that's all that we have that for like I said, all the departments and all the schools, lots and lots of pages. So that's the general fund. We have the pupil transportation is laid out the same way, where they have it doesn't have quite as much. It doesn't have the summary pages. Like it doesn't have it by organization and object. It just has it in this level, but it has it by org. So you can see the pupil transportation total, and the names of them are all up here at the top. So pupil transportation total, and then you can see the different types. Like we have crossing guards, administration, operations, which is the bulk of all our bus service, and then our garage costs. Student nutrition, same way as transportation. You can see it'll have like the summary page, and then it'll have all the detail by each organization within the student nutrition fund. Capital planning. So capital planning is what we put in here is the cost of this is essentially the people and the stuff they need to operate their administrative portion of it. And most of these folks are paid for by bond proceeds. So this one is the only one that really doesn't tie out to what we put in the total in that overview of the governmental funds. So we put $10 million in the governmental funds overview for our upper limit authority request. And that is to take into account any sort of money we would transfer in from the general fund or any sort of state or local grants we would get. So it's anything that's non-bond funded that's paid out of this capital planning construction fund. As you can see over the years, we've spent, well, this doesn't have the spend, but you know, this is just the admin cost to the fund. So you can see how much we're spending on, I guess, the administration of the capital planning construction program. Actual, you know, if you're interested in the actual amount we're spending, a good place to look would be in our CAFR, our comprehensive annual financial report, and that has a lot of detail on those funds. So the grants are laid out a little bit differently. It has the aggregate amounts for our funding sources and actuals and adopted and proposed budgets. And then it's laid out by the type of grant we expect to get. And then we put some contingency in here because we don't always know what grants we're going to get until, you know, the year is over. Essentially, we keep getting new grants throughout the year, and we have this contingency in place to be able to have the upper limit authority to accept the grant. So while the grants may have these big amounts in contingency, you know, we expect to get some new grants, but we don't know if it'll all be used up. So, but these are laid out by cost and then by FTE. So you can see what we're buying with the money that's in the grants. Then we have some high level overview of like historical grant FTE. For the most part, that's the financial section. Appendix A, like I said, this is the state chart of accounts. So if you want to know what is in each one of these different functions are like 100, it'll give you a description of what is included in each function. And we've only used the required codes on here. So you're not going to see like bilingual, bicultural education. So this would be an ELL teacher who's doing face-to-face instruction with students. It's not required, so we report it as function 100. But that's a description of all the functions. And then there's also a description of what's in each state object code. So we're looking at certificated salaries and non-certificated, how all that rolls up together on those detail pages. The other appendices that we have on here are, these are the state functions again, and then the type of folks that are broken out by state function, or the types of teachers, teachers assistants, things like that. So it just kind of gives you a little bit deeper dive into what types of employees are in each one of these categories of the funding. So that's Appendix B. Appendix C is the detailed changes from year to year. So if you look at, if you were to look up these org codes and you want to see why it increased from year to year, you can look at this schedule and it'll, in whatever, like if you were to look at elementary education, you would see, if you see it going up by 9.25 FTE, you can see that these folks, we moved folks in from the Creating Successful Future program that was at Northwood. So we detail out all those changes. So if you see 9 FTE change in elementary, you can look back to this and then you can tie back to what those changes were. And hopefully it all adds up perfectly. I think it does. So it should. And if it doesn't, please let me know. But we have that for all the departments and the special services. And then for the schools, we, in the interest of saving space, we aggregate the metric-based schools together, and then we'll list out some things individually. And then the charter schools we aggregate as well. So then you could see a reduction of our general fund, 225 positions and $18.5 million. So that one's pretty helpful to be able to see what changed throughout the year in each account. This schedule or Appendix D is designed to calculate out the mill rate for the district. And then again, another overview of our funding. And then this last appendix is how we calculate out the upper limit tax request. So the city has a aggregate tax cap, as they call it, and the district calculates out their tax cap separately, but it's included as part of the city's overall tax cap. And this is just our calculation of how that tax cap works. But with that, that's the budget and kind of a quick overview. And happy to ask any questions, or if anyone ever wanted to meet offline, we're always happy to meet with anyone. You don't have to be a board member to meet with us, of course, but just we're always happy to schedule time and sit down and make sure folks understand the information that we're putting out.
So did anyone have any questions before I let Andy go? I so appreciate you, Andy. Thank you so much.
Well, Andy, this is Marilyn Stewart. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's a lot. And I am sincerely appreciative of you taking the opportunity to go over the budget, because even though it's a lot, I still took some key takeaways from it. So thank you very much.
Oh, of course. Yeah, and it's really, once you look at it more and figure out where the information's at, you'll get more comfortable with it. And you can look through it and ask questions like, why is this like that? So then we can get into a little more deep conversations about where our money goes.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Carl, any questions, or Kelly, or?
No, not at this time. I really appreciate the detailed breakdown. I'm also looking forward to meeting with the office management and budget team at some point, as I really want to dig into this information as a member of the board. So thank you.
Of course.
And Kelly, anything?
I'm here and I just appreciate the chance to walk through this all. So
Okay.
it's great. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. I know it's a lot. It's a lot for us, even being on the board for 5 years. It's a little overwhelming sometimes, but Andy, well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate. If you want to stop sharing, I'll share my screen. Thank you.
All right. Well, you guys have a good evening. And then, you know, if anyone ever wants to meet with me, always just give me a call or let Star know, and I'm sure we can arrange something.
All right. Thank you, Andy.
Yep.
So one thing I wanted to talk a little bit about when we went over the budget here, and I think, I'm not sure if all of you did or not, but when we talk about our strategic plan, our goals for the next 5 years, you know, one of the things with our budget is, as a board, we have definitely put our money where our mouth is. I think that's how that saying goes. Anyway, by saying, you know, this is what we heard from the district, from the community. This is what we're supporting in our goals. And this is where we're putting our money. Even though it's one-time funding, it is making a difference by being able to staff those teachers, librarians, counselors, keeping our health teachers, all those things that fall in line with our goals. So I just wanted to point that out. And
Well,
then- yeah,
uh,
Marilyn.
Star,
Yeah,
hear what you're saying, that, and I agree with you, that's wonderful that we was able to keep them on board, right?
right.
So, but are they aware of the condition of them, that it was based off of this one-time funding?
Yeah, the state knows that. The problem is they don't have any money either. and and so what, you know, what we're all hoping is they'll figure out some way to generate some revenue so that we can make education a priority and get it funded adequately, and not, because we have to rely on this one-time funding. At some point it's going to stop.
Well, I agree with you, because this is no way to run something as an organization that is responsible for educating our future generation.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
no, I appreciate that, Marilyn. Thank you. So one of the things you guys are probably going to be most interested in is what's next if you win your race. I thought these people were happy looking and might be you guys celebrating. So,
Star, you need to put masks on them.
oh, I know. I didn't have, well, they don't have faces anyway. but you're right. I couldn't manage the mask, but I hear you. So here's, you know, when you're first congratulations if you get elected. And second, the first thing you want to do is get in touch with our executive assistant to the school board, and that is Katie Grant, as you have met her during these presentations, and she would provide you, as a new board member, a checklist. And I put Katie's email address in there. And Katie is actually located in the same suite of offices as the superintendent on the second floor. So if you were to go upstairs, I call it the fishbowl. It's the office with the big window that looks right into the superintendent. But Katie is actually in those offices, and that's where the mailboxes and things like that are. And then the board president will contact you to set up an orientation. So at your first board meeting, you're going to be sworn in. We have a judge that comes in and actually swears you in. And this is after the assembly meets and certifies the election results. So it could be the 1st of May. You know, you just never know when that'll be. And then the next thing you're going to do when you go into executive session is you're going to look at electing president, vice president, clerk, and treasurer. And just some of the things, and this is actually when it says within 7 days after certification of election results, the school board shall meet to elect its own officers, and in this order: president, vice president, clerk, and treasurer. And so there are board descriptions out there, or role And so like a school board president shall preside at school meetings, call the meeting to order, announce the business to come, enforce the school board's policies, recognize persons who desire to speak, explain what the effect of a motion would be if somebody were to put forth a motion, restrict discussion to the question, rule on parliamentary procedure, put motions to vote, shall also have all the rights of any other member of the school board, including the right to move, second, discuss, and vote on all questions. The president shall also perform other duties as directed by the school board, state law, regulations, and the school board, including the duty to. So one of the things, if you were a board president, you would sign all the instruments, acts, orders necessary to carry out state requirements for the will of the board. So a lot of times as board president, I would sign off on the superintendent's travel because she's our employee, or Miss Grant because she's also our employee if she were to attend any training or anything. And then prepare with the superintendent. You actually meet with the superintendent before school board meetings to plan out the agenda, you and the vice president, and appoint and disband all committees. So that is something that the board president does, and is also an ex officio member of all committees. Again, call meetings to order, excuse board member absent. So if a board member calls into the board president to be excused from a board meeting, he or she would do that. Confer with the superintendent or designee on crucial matters. Be responsible for the orderly conduct of all school board meetings and share informational mail with other school board members. And then the vice president is just in the absence of the president. The vice president shall discharge the duties of the president. Clerk shall ensure that an accurate record of the proceedings of the board is kept and that an electronic copy of the proceedings is presented to each board member and to the superintendent. Treasurer, the treasurer is the custodian of the district funds. He or she shall pay no money from the treasury except for purposes authorized by the law. And so the treasurer shall be bonded. I'm actually the treasurer this year, and so I am bonded with sufficient sureties as the board and the state might require. And the board delegates to the superintendent's office the performance of all ministerial duties of the treasurer. So there are 3 other committees. Well, we'll go through that. But first thing, when in that meeting, you're also going to be assigned a section of schools. So we have 7 sections divided up. It would kind of be Diamond area, East area, Bartlett area, South, those type areas. And then it corresponds with the middle schools and elementary schools that would feed into that. And so as a board member, what we try to do is rotate those. So you might not get the one you want, depending if school board members, we don't have enough people that have not, let's say you have 3 school board members that haven't, and that's the only area they haven't participated in, then, you might have a hard time getting that one. But because we want to make sure that people move around and are able to get into all the locations. Your responsibility, of course, is to visit the schools you've been assigned to. You want to contact the principal, set up those tours so you're not just stopping in, but they know you're coming, and just ask questions and that sort of thing. Now, when you get assigned the schools, you're also going to be assigned the community councils that are correspond with the location of your schools. So you'll be responsible for attending those community councils. And what you're doing is you're providing ASD updates. So what they want you to do is they just want you to report on ASD, what's going on. Is it, if it's budget time, what's going on with the budget? If we had a bond on the election, what is the bond about, and just talk about it. Just give an update on the schools and then answer any questions. So it's very important to have that community engagement. And that's one of the ways we can do it through community councils. There's other committees. We actually have a committee. We have the finance committee. We have the governance committee, which takes care of policy, and we have the communications committee, which works with getting communications out to the public, along with the communications director, Alan Brown. Also talks about our legislative luncheon, advocating for schools through our legislation. Usually we call it a fly-in, where we fly into Juneau and attend training through Alaska Association of School Boards. But some of the other committees that you'll be asked to participate in or be the liaison with, one is the ASD Student Advisory Board. They meet monthly and they just meet during the school year. So that would be a committee that you might be asked to be on, or you might ask to be on. Another one is the Anchorage School Business Partnerships Board of Directors monthly meeting, and that's just during the school year again. And that's just with businesses that have signed up with us. And I believe, I'm trying to think how many business partners we have. I know we have at least over 400. I don't know, there's a lot. It could be up to 500 or more. But these are people that have partnered with our schools, provided resources, provided people for projects, that sort of thing. So it's really, really a good committee to be on. And then in September, we have a retreat I'm sorry. There's a September retreat, and then we also have a school-based community health center, and that meets quarterly. And we talk about the school-based community health centers. Those are the clinics that we have within our schools that a lot of them provide physicals for sports. We do have some mental health providers there that are providing some of that, not very many, but a few. And then, just if a child's sick or something, they can go in there. If they have Medicare, or not Medicare, but Medicaid, as a school district, we can bill them and provide get money back for what we've spent on providing them that service. And it's not always the case, and that's not the reason we do it, but just having that service within the school. And I believe we have 4 schools right now that we're providing that, and it's on the east side. The other one is the Anchorage Chamber of Commerce. They meet weekly, and basically attendance is based on educational topics that they might have going on. I mean, you can go anytime, but when it's focused on education, we definitely want to go. And then there's the Chugach Eagle River Chamber of Commerce. They meet monthly. The Municipality of Anchorage Budget Advisory Commission, which meets monthly, which I actually attend. And then you have the Federation of Community Councils that meets monthly. Association of Alaska School Boards. It's actually an elected position. I served as director and was also elected as treasurer, and would have moved into president if I had not resigned. I think it was up to president-elect, and then next year, towards the end, I would have been president of the Alaska Association of School Boards. Right now, I believe we have Margot Bellamy as a director, and I think that's it, because it was myself and Dina Mitchell, and Dina's also leaving, so there will be some openings. We have the Council of Great City Schools. That's usually an annual conference that we attend. Sometimes they provide additional training that you can sign up for. We also sign up with the Alaska Association of School Boards. They have additional training. A good one is first-time school board members that you would want to sign up for. And then we have the National Black Caucus that is through the National School Board Association. During their annual meetings at the conference, we attend that. Also, the National Native American Alaska Native Caucus, that's with the National School Board Association. We have a RISE, which is a CITC collective impact group, and you actually have to be invited to be a part of this group. I'm not sure if we have anybody on that or not right now. I'd have to check. And then the 90 by 20, this is the United Way Collective Impact Group. And you actually have to be invited to join. Board president is usually a member. I've been a member of this committee and actually have stayed on this committee until I leave. But they are focusing right now on the change. What are we looking at? And the focus has been on pre-K, reading, that sort of thing. So you will still see some new guidelines coming out from them. And it might not be called 90 by 2020 anymore. We'll rename that title and be more focused on what we're trying to accomplish the next 5 years. So you can and will make a difference. Take the time to learn about your new job, learn about the district, be patient, enjoy your new role in the community, and will make a difference for kids. And so I'm a firm believer that sometimes it's that one person that makes all the difference in the world. So thank you for running for school board. And again, I wish you all the best of luck. And I would entertain any questions or any comments or suggestions that we can improve the training. And I'll open it up to you guys.
Star, this is Carl. I'll just jump in really quick to say
Sure.
that I appreciate the training. I appreciate the opportunity. I think there was a lot of useful information in there. I think this is exactly the kind of thing that we want to engage, not just candidates, but even folks in the community who might become candidates someday. So really, really applaud all the work that went into this. And the last thing I'll say is that I appreciate your service as a board member. And one of my regrets is that I won't get to serve alongside you, but thank you for everything you've done for education here in Anchorage.
Well, thank you, Carl. I appreciate that. And thank you for attending. You can do this next time if you get elected.
Hey, Star, this is Kelly.
Hi, Kelly.
I'm good. So I think that it would be useful to make this accessible to the public in some way, like permanently on that school board sort of landing page. You know,
Sure.
I've learned how to navigate the board docs pretty well, but that takes time and effort. And you know, if there could be like a permanent link, then I think it would help open doors to more people to run.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kelly. It's a great suggestion. Marilyn, and what about you?
No, I just wanted to say that, the people will have to make a decision on who they want on the school board to represent them. But my mind is made up that I will get involved, because you don't have to be on the school board Star to make a difference.
You're right.
Yeah,
Right.
and I hope to encourage other people to get involved, because you can't depend on the board to do everything. And I can tell by the way you presented yourself in the PowerPoint presentation that you really, your mission was really to engage the community in some of the decisions that you all have to make as board members, and you do appreciate that. So I'm not sure where your endeavors are going to take you, but I hope you still stay involved in the community, because you really do have great resources and knowledge to add to it. So I thank you, and grateful for the time that you have given to us. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you, Marilyn. I wish you all the best too. And, I do agree. I hope that if you haven't attended a board meeting, that you are watching them. That's that's the easiest way to learn kind of how things are going on and how it's run and what are the issues that we're facing. My time on the school board, I mean, we've just had, we had the earthquake. We've had the pandemic. I mean, I don't think any school board has encountered so many challenges in such a short time. So it's been very interesting. And but when you talk about serving our children and advocating for them, you're right, Marilyn. There's so many other ways. You don't have to be on the school board to do that. We have several committees within the district. volunteer, whatever. There's always a way to serve. So I appreciate that comment. Thank you. All right. Well, we didn't get out as early as we did last time, but it's about a quarter till. And I just want to thank you all for attending. This will be out on the website where the other information was. Kelly will certainly take a look to see where we could put this for anyone that wanted to research being a school board member. They could actually go to that and not have to wait for these trainings. And
Yeah.
Carl, thank you for your comments.
Star, you could just sort of partner it where, Tam had a document, it's somewhere floating out there that I stumbled across a while back, and you just sort of collect them or make a
Yeah,
whole new page.
yeah. I think that's a great idea. So thank you. So well,
Sorry, I
yes.
just want to clarify that this PowerPoint presentation tonight will be posted on ASD website.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that with the budget and the board norms and the code of conduct for the board. Those will all be posted out there. Okay. All right. Well, I thank you, Katie, for being here and helping me with everything, and the other board members also. And I just wish everybody a good evening and I wish you all the best. And I'll be watching those board forums because I think that's always interesting to hear everyone. And if you have any questions that I can answer or Katie can answer or any of our board members, I'm sure we'd be happy to do that for you. So thank you and good evening.